Hi everyone, I'm super excited to host Joshua Weyand, Enterprise Solutions Engineer at Trunk Tools. Thanks a lot for being on the show, Joshua.
Yeah, happy to be here and excited to talk construction and construction tech.
So, Joshua, looking back from your college days till this date, what would be your top three highlights?
Top three highlights. I would say that the three biggest things from a highlight perspective that jump out at me, one would be getting my first internship at a top 50 firm. It was a lot of effort. I had to call this contractor every single Tuesday for about 9 weeks to even get them to pick up the phone. And then at which point actually earned that internship even though that the class was already closed. So was tremendously proud of that because I think it opened up a lot of doors for me from an experience perspective. During that same internship, which actually leads me into my second most favorite highlight of my career, was that I had to do a presentation to close out my internship. And I went through my notes and was feeling pretty good about it. But then we got to the headquarters where we were supposed to present. And I walk in there and I see the president, the CEO, the all the vice presidents at this company were just lined up to the brim. And it occurred to me, oh man, I could really just completely ruin my career here in this moment. And I was so glad that through college I actually took a public speaking course because I would not have been able to say anything. I would have been locked up. I would have been nervous. But one thing I've always learned is that nervousness oftentimes precedes greatness. And if I'm feeling nervous, that's a sign that I have the ability to do great things. So was fortunate enough to go up there and deliver a great speech. Actually, won an award for that and got a free backpack and a few other things. And it's fine, but people always discount the small things, right? Like getting those internships, working on your public speaking skills, all those translate into very, very impactful things for your future. And I'd say that if I had to do, again, a third thing from the early on in my career, I would say just saying yes is so important for young professionals. Doing something that's different and that's atypical and that's going to broaden your horizons. If you had asked me whenever I graduated college, Josh, what do you want to do with your career? I would have told you I want to be a senior project manager. I want to be a project executive. I want to be a VP of ops. But at one point in time in my career, someone said, Josh, we need you to do this VDC thing. And I had never done it. And I said, yes, let's do it. Because of that, I'm at where I'm at today and I'm feeling good. I'm loving what I'm doing. But that all started with one word. And it's nothing that I would have ever had considered had I not just been open to a new opportunity. So those are the top three highlights if I had to give them to you.
Yeah, quite an interesting journey. In your current role, I don't often see people with this title. So can you share like what are the roles and responsibilities for this role and a week in your life?
Yeah, the enterprise solutions engineer role is definitely atypical. I would say what makes it so interesting is that you're really, really focused on trying to pry out problems from customers, especially those that don't tend to articulate well or speak well, or maybe tend to be a little bit more blue collar than your average individual. And the reason why that's so important is that if you've lived that life, if you've been in the field, if you've swung that hammer, you're going to know from an empathy perspective. And I've always been a big believer in empathy. I've talked about it on LinkedIn all the time. But it's so important because if you can't actually pull out the problem statement you're trying to solve for, then your solution's not going to hit. Then more importantly, they're not going to like the product. You might miss a sale. You might miss an opportunity. Someone might have a bad taste in their mouth about you as an individual or your product, right? So always leading with empathy is a big part of what I do. The big thing being that I work with our sales team and our customer success team to get our customers on both sides of the ball and work with them to understand again those problem statements, see how we can make that work, or just pull the plug and say, hey, look, I don't think this is going to be a match, right? Let's just save each other's time. People in construction are working long hours. I'm sure you'd rather have that time back if you had the option to. That's the highlight role, right? But the point being that I need to be the translator between field and tech, which is something I love doing.
Interesting. It has components of empathy, product manager like mindset, where you're translating the requirement. Uh, Quite, and I always feel like it's difficult to get hold of people on the field. So how do you figure out that challenge?
The most challenging piece I would say is that people tend to immediately assume that you do not know what their lives are like, which is true, right? There is definitely nuance in construction. I talk about that all the time too. We can talk about how different market segments operate a little differently. But at the end of the day, I think that anyone in construction is going to care about four things, right? It's going to be cost, it's going to be schedule, it's going to be quality, and it's going to be safety. Because you need to be able to do those four things to not only deliver on time and under budget, but also maintain a relationship through the course of however long you work with this particular owner. In construction, especially through the large general contractors, their repeat work ratio is like 80% to 90%. And so you need to be able to make them feel like what we're going to be doing is helping to offer up a better experience for them so that they can offer up a better experience to their owners. And if you just again take everything away from the field and the heavy machines and the cranes and everything else and just speak to just those points, it makes it a lot easier, right? It makes it way less daunting. I already know what you care about. It's going to be one of those four things. Now I need to figure out which of those four things and how I can align my pitch or align my messaging to you as an individual. Their role has a big part to do with it, right? And then I'd say the second piece is just asking a few discovery questions to be able to dig into what their day today actually looks like. But people are definitely reserved to tell you too much, right? No one's going to be like, man, I have this exact same problem every single day. No one's ever that nice. You got to
Mm.
pry it out.
What's the best channel to get in touch with them? Calling, emailing?
I would say that um, uh, it's a great question. I don't really have a silver bullet. Everyone operates a little bit differently. I've had people where even whenever I was on the general contractor side and I wanted to connect with them at another general contractor, they would only talk to me at conferences. I mean, I could send them a pigeon and I could send them a certified letter. No one would respond to me. But if I actually came up to them face to face, I would get their attention. We would go out to lunch. We'd have drinks. You'd think that we were best friends, but I can't get this person to respond to me. So the what I'll tell people is that everyone responds a little differently. And more importantly, you don't know what that person's dealing with, right? They could be on 70-hour, 80-hour weeks miserable. And then you're just coming in saying, hey, would you like to buy from us? And you're going to get yelled at. And I've listened to a lot of calls in which people are getting yelled at. And unfortunately, I've also yelled at people too. So what I'll tell people is that tenacity is definitely a big thing, right? Being able to accept failure, but also just being able to give people space and just say, look, I can tell right now is a bad time. Would you be okay if I came back in a month or something like that, right? Offer that up because again, you could just catch them at the worst time where they're just got out of an OAC meeting and they're pissed off or whatever. That's what I would tell people.
Mm. What are the skills one has to learn to become a successful enterprise solution?
I would say empathy is a big part of it, right? Really need to be able to understand what the other person's going through, and that is so hard to do if you have not lived that life. I would say that not all solutions engineers come from construction that are in the construction tech industry, obviously, and the ones that are good at it are able to pry questions. They're able to test their assumptions towards that customer base and more importantly repeat back what they're hearing to that individual. That's such an important thing. Hey, I just want to make sure you said that you were dealing with blah 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 blah, and test your assumption, because if they say no, well, you just saved yourself from wasting their time. But if they say yes, right, now you know you're on the right track and you start to unlock this puzzle piece in your mind of what, how you're going to come in and fit that puzzle piece. So that's something I tell people. The other thing that I'll tell people is that you definitely need to dedicate time to tinkering with whatever solution that you're operating in, because you need to be able to know it. Now, I don't need to know it like as well as our backend engineers, but I need to know it well. And more importantly, I need to know who I need to go to be able to ask that follow-up question. What I'll say that the most damaging thing you can do as a solutions engineer is tell someone, "Oh yeah, we can do that," versus just saying, "Hey, I'm going to double check on that. Can I record a Loom video or whatever equivalent you use to get back to you? That way you can watch it on your own time." So that way, hey, again, you're not costing them time in this 30-minute demo or 45-minute demo. You have a limited amount of time. Show them what's relevant, and then if you need to follow up, do it, but allow them to do it on their own time. Those are some things I'll talk about. And from like a hard skill standpoint, public speaking for sure, right? You never know who you're talking to. Again, it could be like my internship where you walk in and there's presidents and CEOs, and that actually did happen to me, and it was really really daunting because there was only one guy in the invite, and then there was like 30 people in this room. So that is a real thing that happens. And then the third thing I'd say is that it would be important to develop uh, good interpersonal skills to be able to speak to what uh, their personal lives, which is, it sounds weird, right? But you want to be building relationships with these people because you need to be able to build trust. Empathy is definitely a lever for that. But the other part needs to be that you need to actually care about what they're going through to be able to develop that empathy. Part of learning how to care is by building up that relationship. So it sounds very detached, but it's so important, right? You don't know these people. How do you know them? And you gotta get to know them. So that's what I think.
Anything you learn the hard way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that you forget sometimes how much different other groups within the AECO world operate. So I was talking to with an architect, and you're thinking, okay, hopefully this translates, relatively well over to engineering, and it does, but not perfectly one to one. So I remember at one point in time I was talking with a process manager, and I was thinking, oh, okay, cool. So they manage process. They're making sure that their engineers are all working together. So going back off to what I said, challenge your assumptions. I started pitching to them again about how Trunk Tools was going to help preserve their process and make their folks streamlined and more importantly make sure that any new engineers coming to this organization get caught up to speed in a short amount of time through the power of AI, right? Just this wonderful pitch. Come to find out that they were process piping engineers, and he was just a process manager. That was their role. And I just felt like again, I was on the spiel for like 15 minutes, and I was passionate, and I was talking about how I rolled this out at Suffolk, and I was like, yeah, probably good to double check again and do that mirroring exercise I was talking about. So that is what kind of drove it. We laughed it off, and they liked the messaging, but the point of the story being, I could have made it more actionable and applicable would have been important.
That's a very interesting story. And like speaking about trunk tools, can you share overview about what it does, at what stage, and what kind of fun and use it?
Yeah. Well, right now it's a Series B company, just secured about 40 million this past July, I believe, and was a really exciting time because I've never ever been at a startup before, but I would say that the best way to define it's like a rocket ship, right? I mean, $40 million can do a lot of things for a company in a short amount of time. So to be able to see the velocity and the impact on product is great because at a high level, we're just this AI company. But when people hear that, they go, "Yeah, man, like AI, right? What can that do for me?" And it's important to talk about where AI fails. And I would say where AI fails right now is where you just throw all this change management onto a company and look away, or you just say, "Man, you can do anything you want. You can do anything you want," and then people find some high value workflows and then the product kind of churns on its own. Where we have found the most success at Trunk Tools and what we offer is through, yeah, having that general conversational AI you see everywhere, but also having these powerful agents that are on specific workflows within construction. And the important part being that if we go and we just say, hey, it's whatever, it's completely bespoke. You can build whatever agent you want. Again, there's going to be a tendency to now freeze, lock up. Okay, this is a big change management effort. What do I want to build? But if we build these products and we tackle true everyday workflows within construction, we see people's eyes light up, and they go, "Oh my gosh, I deal with that every single day." Right? That's what we want to target. The second piece that I would say makes it work is the customer success piece, actually bridging the gap between the product and the people to make sure that what they're getting is directly impacting their scope of work, and more important that they are trained up. And the reason why I say that is because we can talk about how technology has faltered within construction, and people will say a lot of things, but I think it really kind of comes down to just very black and white individuals who are tend to be very traditional, and then you give them an iPad and they don't know what to do with this iPad, or they don't know what to do with this whole BIM and VDC thing. What does it mean, right? And so what do we see, right? We see that these things have low adoption cycles of like 10, 20, 30 years. But if we can come to your job sites and we can show your people how to use these tools and equip them, and more importantly, continuously follow up to make sure that they're getting the expertise and support they need, we see fast adoption cycles. And if you look at AI has had the fastest adoption cycle in construction. That's great, but now how can we make it stick? And that's where that second piece comes in. So, workflows and support. That's how I summarize what Trunk Tools does in a couple paragraphs.
Yes. And it has seen such an exciting growth. How is like the culture of the company? How is the hiring? If someone wants to work at Trump, like how is the best way?
Yeah, it is. It is really competitive. It is brutal. And I say that because I think that what makes a company so great is its people. And if you have, again, this rocket ship that's going off at 10,000 miles per hour, you want to make sure that your people are the right people to be moving at such a fast pace with limited support, limited retraining. We can get you aligned and stood up quicker. And so as a part of that, first and foremost, I'll tell everyone, hey, go apply at the trunktools.com website and then careers. But the second thing being that a lot of times people will come up to me and they'll ask for a referral. And I'm like, look, it is, I'm happy to give a referral for anyone that I've personally worked with. But what makes it so challenging is that, again, there are thousands of applicants to these roles. And so you really need to be an absolute slugger if you want to make it into one of these roles. Because again, if a company is just a bunch of people, we want to have the best people. And a big part of that is making sure, again, that there's alignment early on, there's a low startup time, and more importantly, that you're going to be able to deliver in a short amount of time versus where you have, again, the luxury of doing it at a larger, more stable public company. So that's what I'd tell people is that tenacity, skill set, follow up. Those are all incredibly important skills. And more importantly, just continue to sharpen your saw, continue to build out your skill set and continue to look because there may be other avenues out there. And I say that as someone who's had a lot of career shifts in my lifetime. That would be a good opportunity for you that you may initially dismiss.
If you had a superpower, right? What are other problems which Trump to is not solving?
Man, yeah, you want to know all my startup ideas I got. Yeah, I definitely have a few, but I would say that one thing that I would love to see, again, if we could just blue skies think for a moment and talk about any problem within construction, that'd be great to solve. I would say that one thing that's very, very challenging is, and I've seen a lot of people go about it. I've seen some good success is procurement. I think procurement is so unbelievably important. I think that we saw procurement really become a much bigger deal, especially around COVID, where and then like a ship blocks the Suez Canal, right? And like it was just one thing after another, into which people really wanted to have this supply chain intelligence. And I don't know if there really is a silver bullet, right? I mean, a lot of solutions out there are exceptional. There's Kaya, there's Crane, there's I mean, shoot, there's so many that come to mind. But what I would tell people is that what makes it so challenging is because construction itself is challenging by nature, right? The material buyer can change overnight. Products can go just disappear overnight. I remember this is a true story where we had a curtain wall manufacturer that was going out of business and we wanted to secure our material. So we literally bought a plane ticket for this guy to go to this manufacturing facility to like actually round up the last material himself, the round up the last material from this curtain wall manufacturer to make sure that like we got what we needed before this company closed its windows, right? But like that's extreme, right? But that is I wish I could say that was a one-off situation, but that happens all the time in construction. So I know I'm going on a rant here, but I would really like to see something around that really just kind of does it in a holistic way from cradle all the way to install, and more importantly, the maintenance in attic stock portion of that install. So that's my 2 cents.
It's an idea for someone listening if they're interested to work and be for that. Or they can reach out to you for any detailed feedback. And
Yeah.
in terms of like once you build an MVP, any tips on like go to market sales to get the initial set of customer?
Yeah, whenever I think about go to market, I usually deal with a lot of incredibly smart individuals. We're talking like the Harvard MBAs and the Stanford MBAs and everything else in between. And they usually tell me, like what they're going to do and how they're going to redefine how construction builds and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, go for it. Right. But where I find the most success is where those people are willing to be a student again and they're willing to understand from that empathy perspective what construction actually is, what we actually do. And the reason why I say that is because I have explained how construction works to people who do not work in construction, and they think I'm joking. And I'm like, no, that is actually how backwards and confusing and just all over the place construction actually is. If that's just again how a layman interprets that, then let's talk about your business model. Let's talk about your go to market, because the way that construction actually operates is going to shake the way that you think it's going to work. Uh, I've talked to a lot of people who want to work with innovation teams, and they really want to work with builders in the pilot process. And then I have talked to folks who say, no, we're going to completely skip anyone in innovation. We see it as a black hole. And as someone who worked in innovation, I can't really disagree with them, right? I mean, it's definitely a sand trap in many ways. What I would say is that where I see people succeed, where I don't see people succeed, is just coming in again with a belief that construction, that and that your model is going to change the way that this industry that's existed since the dawn of time works is wrong. And I would encourage you to, again, be a student if you can help it. Spend time at a job site. If you can help it, work at a trade for like a month. Just take an apprentice role just so you can actually understand how these things work, because it's hard to articulate and it's hard to put into words sometimes all the nuances and all the things that make construction the behemoth and the confusing behemoth that it is today.
What do you think is underrated in construction technology and one thing that is overrated in construction tech?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say I recognize how ironic this is for me to say as I work at an AI company, but when someone just like comes in guns blazing with, we're going to AI this, we're going to AI that, I have to just ask, like, okay, well, what are you actually solving for? Because again, it's easy for me to define for truck tools, right? But I'll see it just plastered. We're doing AI everything, and or we're gonna be as predictive as humanly possible. And I will look at people's websites, and if I can't understand what your value proposition is or what you're actually solving for in less than 10 seconds, I consider that a failure. And the reason why I say that is because, look, I came from construction tech. My background's construction tech. I love construction tech. So if I can't figure it out in 10 seconds, the average customer, the average builder who's going to come onto your website in 5 seconds is not going to figure it out. I would say that, again, people have these really complicated pitches. People say a bunch of words that don't actually mean anything, a lot of filler, a lot of buzzwords. And you got to recognize that, again, people from construction do not care, and they want to know how you're going to impact those four things we talked about and do it in a way that makes sense. That is the most important thing I can tell people about, again, their product, and especially their website, because again, that's the first thing people look at whenever they look up your product. They're not going to go click on your YouTube videos from 2 years ago. They're not going to do any of that. They're going to check out your website, and they're going to see what your customers are saying on sources like LinkedIn and TikTok or Twitter or something like that.
Can you elaborate a bit on how the buyer in construction makes decision? You said they could review the website. Like what else?
Yeah. The buyer in construction is an enigma. And I say it's an enigma because, if every construction tech company knew exactly who the buyer was, we would all have a great time, right? We'd all be high-fiving each other on a yacht somewhere. But it's not the case. And the reason why I say that is because the buyer could be anybody. You never know at a company who has signing authority and who does not have signing authority. And to be clear, right, I was the director of emerging tech at Suffolk, and I did not have buying authority at that company, right? I was just this, we'll call it like an evaluator or gatekeeper, whatever word you want to use. The people that actually had signing authority was just your average project manager at the job site, right? They could very well, right, depending on their role, sign a contract without me knowing. And then, now they are a buyer of technology. And what ends up happening is that causes a lot of friction inside of a company and usually makes a lot of people upset. So I say that with the big old asterisk, just being, okay, be careful about how you do that and who you do that with. But the point being, though, right, if you have signing authority at a project level, you are technically a buyer. But people in construction tech do not care about individual buyers. They want the enterprise, right? They want the big money. They want to turn their ARR into a number that's going to turn heads inside of their boardroom. And how you do that is by actually impacting the true decision makers, true buyers at a company, which tend to be right anywhere. I hate saying this, anywhere between the C-suite and typically a VP level, who's going to have that enterprise buying ability. Typically, like, again, it could be on the ops side in like a VP of ops, or even a COO, or it could be a CTO or a CIO. It could be a VP of information and technology. It really just totally depends. But the point being, though, if you're at that level, you typically have signing authority. You can very well sign a contract and no one can stop you. So that's what I tell people is that you never know. And anytime you talk with an organization, you do not know what their organizational structure is like, which makes it so challenging. And they're not going to tell you, right? They're not going to tell you. So all that to be said, it's a confusing landscape. No one really knows, but again, it depends where you want to land, right? If you want to land on a pilot or you want to go for the enterprise. So repeating back to you, you said like what's the loop look like a traditional sales cycle?
Like, what's the play you uh for this to get to pilot to annual
Yeah, yeah.
contract to enterprise?
It's a bit of a game in the sense that let's say you meet with the project team, you secure a pilot. And I'm always a big believer in the philosophy because the last thing you want to do is just be stuck with a lot of enterprise tech that you A, haven't rolled out, and B, don't have a change management plan in place for, and C, don't even know if it works for your business model, which in a low risk industry like construction is not going to work. Right. So let's pretend again, we're going to do a pilot model. You penetrate at the project level and you got a maybe like one or two pilots. The important part being that I would say either those projects are completely different, they're in different markets, or they're on the exact same campus. And the reason why I say that is because I think it's important to do a little bit of A/B testing in the sense, okay, hey, we've done this technology on project A, this technology on project B. They're on the same campus. They're identical projects. Makes it easier to do that evaluation. The other thing I could say is that when you do a evaluation on a job, you want to try to understand what the actual success criteria is, and more importantly, be able to define that in an objective manner to whoever that decision maker is. And sometimes they don't even know what the success criteria is. So you have to help them figure out, hey, what does success look like when we're done here? Because oftentimes what happens, you do a pilot and then nothing happens. And people get confused. They're like, well, that was a great pilot. And you have to ask, well, by what metric was that a great pilot? And then they're like, well, we never talked about metrics. And so you can start to see what I'm talking about here is how important that is to just level set and understand early on what the success criteria looks like, what the metrics look like, and more importantly, what the support model looks like to be able to get it off the ground and be able to get that done. The second piece is that, great, you've done the pilot, you got the success metric, now what? And this is where the contractor and the vendor really need to work together to be able to understand what that larger organization looks like, what a larger rollout would look like. Hey, if we're only on one or two projects, how about we do like a single project rollout in each of your markets and then or each of your regions, and then we can scale up from there. Or maybe we just take over one market completely because the data says that we're going to create the most impact through data centers or hospitality or something. And just be strategic about it, right? They want to be partners. Everyone wants to make money and everyone wants to be happy. So come to the table, roll up your sleeves, and be willing to work to understand what that looks like at a high level.
What's the best piece of advice?
The best piece of advice I can give to someone in a construction or construction tech, I would say that the best piece of advice I could give to yeah anyone in this space is that in the solution space in general is that you need to be willing to admit defeat at times because sunk cost is a real thing, and more importantly that hits way harder at a startup when you have limited resources and limited time. So the important thing, being able to admit defeat or being able to pivot and having a good peer network, that is the most important thing I could tell you, is to actually have peers in which you can soundboard, whiteboard ideas with, and be a thought partner is critical. Because I've worked with people who, just as an example, built like this really cool thing that they were passionate about in California. And then they met with a builder that I introduced them to in Boston. And they were like, yeah, this isn't going to work for us or our market. And it completely shifted their perspective just because they never had exposure to that type of market style. So yeah, that be willing to challenge your assumptions, be willing to tinker and test and give up and admit defeat and pivot. And then be willing to have a strong support network in which you can talk to your mentor, talk to again people at your level, below you, above you, at different companies. Change the way you think, and that'll change the way you do things.
That's a great one, Josh. I have a rapid fire. You have less than 10 seconds to answer the question. You gotta keep
Okay.
it super brief. What's your favorite restaurant?
My favorite restaurant?
Yes.
Hmm. I am a big fan of Thai restaurants, not any restaurant in particular, but I'm a Thai food fiend. That's my 10 seconds.
City or country? in your travel bucket list?
When I went to Vancouver, Canada, that was the most beautiful and lovely experience. The food was exceptional, the people are exceptional, and the views were just gorgeous. Like I wanted to leave this conference and just go hiking immediately. Highly recommend Vancouver.
Your favorite movie?
Interstellar, Interstellar by a large margin. That movie just gets me the chills. I don't even know how to explain it.
Any book which made a big impact in your life?
Ooh, book that impacted my life. Yeah, that's such a good question. I would say a classic is How to Win Friends and Influence People is a good one. And I don't know, I'll have to write a whole blog post about that. That's a good question.
What would you say to your 18-year-old self?
Oh man. 18-year-old Josh. Yeah, he was a unique kid at 18. I would tell him that don't discredit how important your education is in comparison to your extracurricular, your network, all that wonderful stuff. If I could go back and again buckle down on my business courses, trust me, I would have, because you never know where you're going to end up in life.
Top three conferences you recommend in construction.
Okay, yeah, good question. Three conferences. I would say that the IBCA conference in Vancouver was great. If you're up in the Canada and area, I would highly recommend. In the Americas, I would really recommend going to. Um, sorry, some of them are private, so that's what I'm trying to. I really enjoyed going to ENR Future Tech. I thought that was great just to be able to see practical applications of technology in the field. I did also enjoy going to Procore Groundbreak for the same reasons. I would say that the asterisk to both of those is that there's definitely a lot of fluff. You got to go to the back sections to be able to see the startups, to be able to see what they're doing. And more importantly, I would say the networking is so critical to being able to interact with peers, even if you're not, a Procore customer or an ENR customer or ACC Autodesk customer. Just going there, talking to people, understanding their stories, and being a student your entire life. Cannot recommend that enough to people.
Your role model?
My role model? Man, that's a good question. My role model, I would have to say, is my mentor. She's awesome. I look up to her all the time. I think she does great things, but unfortunately, not anyone famous that you would probably know. But again, I think it's important to have a mentor and someone that you can bounce ideas off of.
That's why anything which related covers this interview, I would like to like closing note.
No, I would say that the most important thing that we talk about stigmas in construction. I would say mental health is a really really big deal. You never know what someone else is going through on a job site, whether you're on the field or in the office or you're in construction tech. You never know what someone's going through, and the reason why I say that is because construction has really long hours. Series B tends to be a little bit better on the construction tech side, but if you're pre-seed, you're early, you're working long hours. And oftentimes you're spending more time with your coworkers than your family. So always check in on the people you're working with. You never know what they're going through, and just be willing to love one another. I mean, this is such a hard industry. What makes it so great is its community, and I'm a firm believer of that.
Amazing.